You are listening to Miniature Masterpieces.
Chapter 1. The Mysterious Figure on the Road. It was a gloomy night in the month of November. The mist was so thick that it seemed to wrap everything in a shroud, and the darkness was so intense that it was impossible to see anything more than a few feet ahead. I had been traveling on foot for hours, and my journey had been long and tiring. As I walked along the deserted road, I began to feel anxious and apprehensive. I had heard stories of highwaymen and robbers in this part of the country, and the silence was unnerving. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps coming towards me. At first, I was relieved to see that it was a woman who was approaching. However, as she drew closer, I could see that there was something strange about her. She was dressed in white, and her face was hidden behind a thick veil. Her hands were clasped together in front of her, and she walked with a slow and unsteady gait. As she drew level with me, she suddenly stopped and raised one hand in a gesture of warning. "Take care," she said in a low voice. "Take care how you go. Do not turn back. There is danger behind you." I was startled by her words and looked behind me, but I could see nothing in the darkness. When I turned back to speak to the woman, she had disappeared. I searched the area around me, but there was no trace of her. It was as though she had vanished into thin air. Feeling uneasy and bewildered, I continued on my journey, but I could not shake the memory of the woman in white from my mind. Who was she, and why had she warned me of danger? What was the meaning of her strange appearance and disappearance? These questions plagued me as I walked, and I knew that I would not be able to rest until I had found the answers. As I walked on, I could not help but feel that the woman in white was a symbol of the mystery and intrigue that lay ahead of me. Little did I know that my encounter with her was just the beginning of a chain of events that would change my life forever. Chapter 2. Walter Hartright arrives at Limmeridge House. As I approached Limmeridge House, the home of my new employer, I couldn't help but be struck by its grandeur and beauty. Nestled in the heart of the English countryside, it was a stately mansion surrounded by rolling hills and lush gardens. As I walked up the winding path that led to the front door, I could hear the sound of music and laughter drifting on the breeze. I felt a twinge of excitement at the prospect of starting my new job as drawing master to the young ladies of the house. As I entered the grand hall, I was greeted by an elderly servant who led me to meet my new employer, Mr. Frederick Fairlie. Mr. Fairlie was a small and sickly man, with a high-pitched voice and an exaggerated sense of his own importance. He welcomed me with great formality and instructed me on my duties as drawing master, which he seemed to regard as of the utmost importance. I was then introduced to the two young ladies of the house, Miss Laura Fairlie and Miss Marian Halcombe. Miss Fairlie was a delicate and beautiful young woman, with blonde hair and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and kindness. Miss Halcombe, on the other hand, was a more practical and down-to-earth woman, with a strong will and a keen mind. As we sat down to dinner, I found myself charmed by the warmth and hospitality of the household. Mr. Fairlie was fussy and self-important, but he was also generous and kind-hearted. Miss Fairlie and Miss Halcombe were delightful company, and I felt honored to be in their company. After dinner, I retired to my room, feeling content and satisfied. I had a sense that my new position would be a fulfilling one, and that I had found a new home among the friendly and welcoming people of Limmeridge House. Little did I know that my new life would soon be shattered by a series of strange and inexplicable events. The arrival of the mysterious woman in white had been only the beginning of a dark and mysterious journey. Chapter 3. A shocking revelation from a lawyer. The next day, I was in the garden of Limmeridge House when I was approached by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Gilmore, the family lawyer. He was a tall, thin man with sharp features and an air of authority. I could tell immediately that he was not a man to be trifled with. He informed me that he had been instructed by the late Mr. Philip Fairlie to inform Miss Laura Fairlie of a matter of great importance. It seemed that Mr. Fairlie's fortune was entailed in such a way that it could only be inherited by a male heir. This meant that if Miss Fairlie did not marry and have a son, the estate would pass to a distant cousin whom Mr. Fairlie had never met. I was shocked and saddened by this news. Miss Fairlie was such a kind and gentle person, and it seemed unfair that she should be punished for something beyond her control. Mr. Gilmore then informed me that there was a potential solution to the problem. Miss Fairlie had a distant cousin, Sir Percival Glyde, who had recently returned from abroad. Sir Percival was a wealthy and respected gentleman, and it was thought that he might be willing to marry Miss Fairlie in order to secure the inheritance. I was uneasy about this arrangement. Sir Percival was a stranger, and it seemed to me that he might be marrying Miss Fairlie for the wrong reasons. However, Mr. Gilmore assured me that Sir Percival was a gentleman of the highest character, and that he would make Miss Fairlie a devoted and loving husband. As I pondered this news, I could not help but feel that the future of Limmeridge House hung in the balance. The fate of Miss Fairlie and her family was now in the hands of a stranger, a man whom they had never met. I knew that I would have to keep a close eye on Sir Percival and make sure that he was worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. Little did I know that Sir Percival Glyde was not the man that he appeared to be, and that his arrival at Limmeridge House would herald a series of dark and sinister events that would shake the very foundations of the estate. Chapter 4. The brave Miss Halcombe takes charge. As I settled into my new role as drawing master at Limmeridge House, I quickly became aware of the unusual situation in which Miss Halcombe and Miss Fairlie found themselves. Their late fathers had stipulated that they could not inherit their mother's fortune, and instead it would pass to a distant male relative. Miss Halcombe was determined to challenge the will, and to ensure that her beloved sister was not left destitute. I was impressed by Miss Halcombe's courage and determination, and I knew that she would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. She was a force to be reckoned with, and I felt grateful to have her as an ally. One day, Miss Halcombe received a letter from a lawyer in London, informing her that he had evidence that could help to overturn the will. Miss Halcombe wasted no time, and immediately set off for London, leaving Miss Fairlie in my care. As the days passed, Miss Halcombe's absence began to take its toll on Miss Fairlie. She became increasingly anxious and restless, and I could see the strain beginning to show on her delicate features. I did my best to comfort her, but I knew that there was only so much I could do. Finally, Miss Halcombe returned, bearing news that would change everything. She had succeeded in her mission, and the will had been overturned. Miss Fairlie's inheritance was secure, and the sisters were free to live their lives as they saw fit. I was filled with admiration for Miss Halcombe's bravery and determination. She had shown herself to be a true heroine, and I knew that she would always be a force to be reckoned with. As we celebrated our victory, I felt a sense of hope and optimism for the future, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Chapter 5. The Eccentric Mr. Fairlie. Mr. Frederick Fairlie, the owner of Limmeridge House, was a man of great eccentricity and fastidiousness. He was obsessed with his health and had a long list of imaginary ailments that he believed required constant attention. He was also particular about his environment and demanded that everything in the house be kept in perfect order at all times. As drawing master to the young ladies of the house, I found myself in Mr. Fairlie's company more often than I would have liked. He was a difficult man to please, and was quick to find fault with any aspect of my teaching that did not meet his exacting standards. Despite his prickly nature, I could not help but feel a certain affection for Mr. Fairlie. He was a lonely man, and I could see that he relied heavily on the company of Miss Halcombe and Miss Fairlie, whom he treated almost as surrogate daughters. I could not help but feel that Mr. Fairlie's eccentricities were a mask for a deep and abiding sadness. One day, as I was walking in the gardens of Limmeridge House, I came across Mr. Fairlie in a state of great agitation. He had just received a letter from his cousin, Sir Percival Glyde, and it seemed that the news was not to his liking. Sir Percival had expressed his intention to visit Limmeridge House in the near future, and Mr. Fairlie was beside himself with worry at the thought of entertaining a stranger. As I listened to Mr. Fairlie's complaints, I could not help but feel that there was more to his anxiety than met the eye. It seemed that Sir Percival's arrival was connected in some way to the secret that Miss Halcombe and Miss Fairlie had spoken of, and that Mr. Fairlie was afraid of what might be revealed. Despite my misgivings, I could not help but feel a sense of excitement at the thought of meeting Sir Percival Glyde. I knew that he was an important figure in the family's fortune, and that his arrival would mark a significant turning point in the history of Limmeridge House. Little did I know that Sir Percival's arrival would bring with it a series of dark and dangerous events that would test my loyalty, my courage, and my very sanity. The stage was set for a deadly game of intrigue and betrayal, one that would lead to a shocking and unforgettable conclusion. Chapter 6: A Terrifying Midnight Encounter. As I lay in my bed at Limmeridge House, I was suddenly awoken by a loud noise outside my window. At first, I assumed it was nothing more than a branch brushing against the glass, but as the noise persisted, I began to feel a sense of unease. I got out of bed and approached the window, peering out into the darkness. What I saw chilled me to the bone. A dark figure was standing outside my window, its face obscured by the shadows. It seemed to be staring directly at me, as if it could see through the glass and into my very soul. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and my heart began to race. I knew that I was in the presence of something truly terrifying, something that defied explanation. I tried to muster up the courage to speak, to ask the figure what it wanted, but my voice failed me. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the night, leaving me alone and shaken. I could not shake the feeling that I had just had a brush with something otherworldly, something beyond my understanding. The next day, I recounted my experience to Miss Halcombe, who listened with a grave expression on her face. She informed me that the figure I had seen was likely to be Catherick, the young woman who had once been a resident at a nearby asylum. Miss Halcombe had been investigating her case, and it seemed that Anne was somehow connected to the strange events that were unfolding at Limmeridge House. As the days passed, I could not shake the memory of that terrifying midnight encounter. It seemed to haunt me, lurking in the back of my mind, always just out of reach. I knew that I was in the midst of something far larger and more sinister than I had ever imagined, and I wondered whether I would ever be able to uncover the truth. Chapter 7: The Engagement of Laura and Sir Percival. It was with a heavy heart that I learned of Miss Fairlie's engagement to Sir Percival Glyde. I had always harbored feelings for her, and the thought of her marrying another man filled me with a sense of despair. Despite my own feelings, however, I could not help but be happy for Miss Fairlie. Sir Percival was a wealthy and respected man, and he seemed to genuinely care for her. I knew that she would be well provided for, and that she would be happy with him. As the wedding approached, the atmosphere at Limmeridge House was one of excitement and anticipation. Miss Halcombe, who had been somewhat skeptical of Sir Percival at first, had come to see him in a more favorable light, and she worked tirelessly to ensure that the wedding would go smoothly. On the day of the wedding, the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Miss Fairlie looked radiant in her white gown, and Sir Percival beamed with pride as he took her hand. As the vows were exchanged, I could not help but feel a sense of melancholy. I knew that this was the end of my own hopes for a future with Miss Fairlie, and I wondered what the future would hold for me. Despite my own feelings, however, I was happy for Miss Fairlie and Sir Percival. They were clearly in love, and I knew that they would be happy together. As the celebrations continued into the night, I found myself lost in thought. I knew that I had to move on from my own feelings for Miss Fairlie, and that I had to find my own path in life. The future was uncertain, but I felt a sense of hope and determination, knowing that I would face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and resilience. Chapter 8. Investigating Sir Percival's Past. With Miss Fairlie's wedding to Sir Percival Glyde now behind us, Miss Halcombe and I turned our attention to investigating his past. We both had our suspicions about the man, and we knew that there were unanswered questions about his history that needed to be addressed. Our investigations took us far and wide, as we traveled to Sir Percival's former home in Cumberland and spoke with his former associates and acquaintances. We soon discovered that Sir Percival's past was far from spotless, and that there were many unsavory rumors circulating about him. One particular incident stood out in our minds. Sir Percival had been involved in a legal dispute with a man named Mrs. Catherick, who had accused him of cheating her out of her inheritance. The details of the case were murky, but we sensed that there was more to the story than met the eye. As we dug deeper, we also learned that Sir Percival was heavily in debt, and that he had borrowed money from a man named Count Fosco, who had a reputation for being unscrupulous and dangerous. Our investigations took a dangerous turn when we were confronted by a group of men who had been hired by Sir Percival to intimidate us. They warned us to stop our inquiries, and we knew that we were treading on dangerous ground. Despite the danger, however, we were determined to uncover the truth about Sir Percival. We knew that he was not what he appeared to be, and that his past was full of secrets and lies. As we delved deeper into the case, we began to piece together a disturbing picture of Sir Percival's true nature. We realized that he was capable of anything, and that we needed to be careful if we were to expose him and protect those who were in danger. Our investigations had taken us down a dark and dangerous path, but we knew that we had to see it through to the end. The truth about Sir Percival's past was out there, and we were determined to uncover it, no matter what the cost. Chapter 9. Laura's Mysterious Illness. Following our investigations into Sir Percival Glyde's past, Miss Halcombe and I returned to Limmeridge House to find that Miss Fairlie had fallen ill. Her condition was a cause for great concern, as she seemed to be suffering from a mysterious illness that had left her weak and feverish. Despite the best efforts of the local doctor, Miss Fairlie's condition did not improve, and we became increasingly worried about her welfare. It was clear that something was seriously wrong, and we were determined to get to the bottom of it. Our investigations led us to believe that Miss Fairlie's illness was not a natural one, but rather the result of something more sinister. We began to suspect that Sir Percival had something to do with it, and we redoubled our efforts to uncover the truth. As we delved deeper into the case, we uncovered evidence that Sir Percival had been giving Miss Fairlie a mysterious potion, which he claimed was a medicine to help her recover. We became convinced that this potion was in fact a powerful drug, and that it was the cause of her illness. With this evidence in hand, we confronted Sir Percival, demanding that he reveal the truth about the potion. To our surprise, he admitted that it was indeed a drug, and that he had been giving it to Miss Fairlie in an attempt to control her and make her more compliant. Our suspicions had been confirmed, and we were horrified by Sir Percival's callous behavior. Miss Fairlie's health was still precarious, and we knew that we needed to act quickly if we were to save her. With the help of a trusted doctor, we were able to counteract the effects of the drug and nurse Miss Fairlie back to health. It was a long and difficult process, but we were ultimately successful in our efforts. As Miss Fairlie began to recover, we were left to reflect on the dark and twisted motives that had led Sir Percival to harm her in such a way. It was clear that he was not the honorable man that he had claimed to be, and that we had been right to suspect him all along. Chapter 10. The Disappearance of Catherick. As Miss Fairlie's health began to improve, we turned our attention to the mysterious disappearance of Catherick. It was clear that Sir Percival had played some role in her disappearance, and we were determined to uncover the truth. Our investigations led us to believe that Anne had been taken to London by Sir Percival, where she was being held captive by his associates. We knew that time was of the essence, and that we needed to act quickly if we were to save her. Miss Halcombe and I traveled to London to track down Anne and confront Sir Percival. We found ourselves in a dangerous and unfamiliar world, where we were forced to rely on our wits and our courage to survive. Despite the many obstacles we faced, we were eventually able to locate Anne and secure her release. It was a moment of great relief, and we were overjoyed to see her reunited with her mother. However, our victory was short-lived, as we soon discovered that Sir Percival was plotting a terrible revenge against us. He had learned of our involvement in Anne's release, and he was determined to punish us for our interference. We found ourselves in a deadly game of cat and mouse with Sir Percival, as we struggled to evade his grasp and protect ourselves from his wrath. It was a harrowing and terrifying experience, but we were determined to see it through to the end. In the end, we were able to outmaneuver Sir Percival and escape his clutches. It was a narrow victory, but we had succeeded in our mission to save Catherick and expose Sir Percival's dark secrets. As we made our way back to Limmeridge House, we were left to ponder the many mysteries that still remained unsolved. We knew that there were still many challenges ahead, and that we would need to rely on our courage and our ingenuity to overcome them. But we were determined to see the truth revealed and justice served, no matter what the cost. Chapter 11. Walter Hartright returns to England. After the tumultuous events in London, I was relieved to return to England and resume my duties as a drawing master at Limmeridge House. However, I could not shake the memory of the enigmatic woman in white who had crossed my path so unexpectedly. Imagine my surprise, then, when I received a letter from her, imploring me to meet with her and help her in a time of great need. Despite my better judgment, I found myself unable to resist her plea, and I made arrangements to meet her in secret. Our meeting was brief and unsettling, as the woman in white revealed to me the tragic and disturbing circumstances of her life. She had suffered greatly at the hands of her cruel and manipulative husband, Sir Percival Glyde, and she was now living in fear for her safety. I knew that I could not stand idle by and watch her suffer, and I made a vow to protect her and help her in any way I could. However, I soon discovered that my involvement in her affairs would not be without consequences. My inquiries into the woman's situation led me down a dangerous path, where I found myself embroiled in a complex and treacherous web of deceit and intrigue. I was forced to confront the shadowy figures who had been manipulating her life, and I realized that I had put myself and those I loved in great danger. Despite the many obstacles and dangers I faced, I remained determined to see justice served and the truth revealed. I knew that I had to rely on my wits and my courage to navigate this treacherous landscape, and I was determined to see it through to the end. As I plunged deeper into the mystery surrounding the woman in white, I found myself drawing closer to those who were also invested in uncovering the truth. Together, we worked tirelessly to expose the dark secrets that lay at the heart of her suffering. In the end, our efforts paid off, and we were able to bring the culprits to justice and free the woman from her torment. It was a bittersweet victory, tinged with the sadness of all that had been lost, but we were left with a sense of accomplishment and a renewed faith in the power of justice and truth. Chapter 12. The Secret of Sir Percival Glyde. As I delved deeper into the mystery surrounding the woman in white and her plight, I found myself confronted with a host of new challenges and dangers. Among them was the enigmatic figure of Sir Percival Glyde, the woman's husband, who had a dark and mysterious past that seemed to be tied up with her own. Despite his initial charm and polished demeanor, I soon began to suspect that Sir Percival was not all that he appeared to be. There was something cold and calculating in his eyes, and I could not help but feel a sense of unease whenever I was in his presence. As I began to investigate his past and unravel the web of secrets and lies that surrounded him, I soon discovered that there was much more to Sir Percival than met the eye. His true nature was revealed in a shocking and devastating manner, as I uncovered the terrible truth about his past and his motives. It was a truth that would have far-reaching consequences, not just for the woman in white, but for all those who had been drawn into his web of deceit and manipulation. I knew that I had to act quickly and decisively if I was to protect those I loved and see justice served. With the help of my allies, including the fearless Miss Halcombe and the eccentric Mr. Fairlie, I began to piece together the clues that would lead us to the heart of Sir Percival's dark secrets. It was a dangerous and perilous journey, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but I knew that I had no choice but to see it through. As the truth began to emerge, and the full extent of Sir Percival's crimes was laid bare, I found myself filled with a sense of both horror and triumph. Horror at the depths of depravity to which he had sunk, and triumph at the knowledge that justice had finally been served. In the end, Sir Percival's secrets were revealed, and he was brought to account for his crimes. It was a moment of great catharsis, as we watched him fall from his lofty perch and face the consequences of his actions. But even as the dust settled, and we began to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives, I knew that the legacy of Sir Percival's dark secrets would linger on, haunting us and shaping our destinies in ways that we could not yet imagine. Chapter 13. Laura flees from Blackwater Park. As the events of the past few days began to weigh heavily on my mind, I found myself increasingly worried about the safety and well-being of Laura, the woman I had come to care for deeply. Despite my best efforts to protect her from the machinations of Sir Percival and his diabolical ally Count Fosco, it seemed that danger was never far away. And so it was that one fateful night, as we sat in the drawing room at Blackwater Park, that Laura confided in me her deepest fears and concerns. She spoke of her growing sense of unease and foreboding, of her fears for her own safety and that of her beloved sister Marian. It was then that she made the decision to flee from Blackwater Park, to escape the clutches of Sir Percival and his wicked accomplice, and seek refuge with her friends and allies. And I knew that I had to help her, to do everything in my power to ensure her safe passage and protect her from harm. With the help of Marian and our trusted servant Louis, we began to make preparations for Laura's escape. It was a dangerous and difficult task, fraught with uncertainty and peril, but we were determined to see it through. As the night wore on, we made our way through the dark and forbidding corridors of Blackwater Park, always mindful of the danger that lurked around every corner. And when we finally emerged into the cool night air, we knew that we had made the right choice. But our relief was short-lived, as we soon realized that Sir Percival and Count Fosco were in hot pursuit, determined to stop us at any cost. And so began a dangerous game of cat and mouse, as we raced across the countryside, always one step ahead of our pursuers. It was a journey filled with danger and uncertainty, as we braved treacherous roads and faced down violent assailants. But through it all, Laura remained resolute and determined, her spirit unbroken even in the face of overwhelming adversity. And when we finally arrived at our destination, weary and battered but alive, I knew that I had done everything in my power to protect the woman I loved. For in the end, it was not just Laura's safety that was at stake, but the very future of our lives together. Chapter 14. Walter Hartright searches for Catherick. After being informed by Marian that Catherick had been seen near the asylum, Walter Hartright is consumed with a determination to find her. He sets out on a journey to the place where she was last seen, with hopes of finally uncovering the truth behind her mysterious disappearance. As Walter walks through the desolate streets, he comes across a number of people who provide him with varying accounts of Anne's whereabouts. Some claim to have seen her walking aimlessly through the town, while others believe she may have been taken in by a local family. Undeterred, Walter continues his search, feeling that he is finally getting closer to solving the puzzle of Anne's fate. Days turn into weeks, and Walter's health begins to suffer as he spends long hours traveling and questioning locals. Despite his fatigue, he persists in his search, driven by his desire to bring closure to the mysterious case of Catherick. Finally, on a stormy night, Walter receives a breakthrough in his investigation. A woman who had previously refused to speak with him finally agrees to share what she knows. She reveals that Anne had been staying with her for a time, but had left abruptly in the middle of the night, without any explanation. She provides Walter with a rough description of the direction Anne had taken, and he sets out once more. As Walter treks through the wild countryside, he finally catches sight of a figure in the distance. It is Anne Catherick. She is gaunt and worn, but unmistakably herself. Overcome with emotion, Walter rushes towards her, but she runs away in fear. It takes some time, but eventually, Walter is able to calm her down and convince her to speak with him. In the following conversation, Anne reveals to Walter the shocking truth about Sir Percival's true character, and how she had been forced to play a role in his schemes. Her words confirm Walter's suspicions, and he realizes that he has uncovered a web of lies and deceit that stretches back for years. As they part ways, Walter knows that his mission is not yet over. There is still much to be done to bring justice to those who have been wronged. Chapter 15. The Return of Sir Percival Glyde. As soon as Sir Percival Glyde returns to Blackwater Park, his behavior becomes more erratic, and his attitude towards Walter Hartright and Marian Halcombe more aggressive. He accuses Walter of spreading lies about him and forbids Marian from leaving the house without his permission. Meanwhile, Laura's health continues to decline, and Dr. Dawson is summoned to attend to her. He is perplexed by her symptoms and can find no physical cause for her illness. Laura's mental state also begins to deteriorate, and she becomes increasingly paranoid, convinced that Sir Percival is plotting against her. One day, while walking in the grounds of Blackwater Park, Marian and Walter come across a deserted building. Walter recognizes it as the old ruin where he had first seen Anne Catherick. Marian suggests that they investigate the building further, and they discover a hidden room containing a bed, a chair, and a mirror. Walter realizes that the room must have been used by Anne Catherick during her previous stay at Blackwater Park, and he becomes convinced that she must have returned there again. He sets off to search for her, but is warned by Marian to be careful as she believes that Sir Percival may have spies watching them. As Walter sets out on his search, he encounters a group of gypsies who tell him that they have seen a woman matching Anne Catherick's description. They lead him to a nearby village, where he eventually finds Anne hiding in a dilapidated cottage. Anne is initially afraid of Walter, but he manages to gain her trust by revealing his concern for Laura and his suspicion that Sir Percival is behind her illness. Anne agrees to help Walter by revealing what she knows about Sir Percival's past, but warns him that they must be careful as he is a dangerous man. With Anne's help, Walter begins to unravel the secrets of Sir Percival's past and discovers that he has been involved in a series of financial scams and illegal transactions. He also learns that Sir Percival has a mysterious connection to Anne Catherick, which he is desperate to keep hidden. As Walter returns to Blackwater Park with this new knowledge, he realizes that he has become deeply embroiled in a dangerous web of deceit and intrigue. He is determined to protect Laura and expose Sir Percival's true nature, but he knows that he must be careful as the stakes are high and the danger is real. Chapter 16. The Cunning Plot of Count Fosco. When Count Fosco arrives at Blackwater Park, he wastes no time in exerting his influence over Sir Percival Glyde and manipulating the situation to his advantage. He immediately takes control of the household, putting the servants on edge with his imposing presence and charming demeanor. Walter Hartright, who has been watching the house from a distance, becomes increasingly suspicious of the Count's intentions. He becomes convinced that Fosco is in league with Sir Percival to deceive and harm Laura Fairlie, whom Walter still loves despite her engagement to Sir Percival. Meanwhile, Laura is plagued by nightmares and premonitions of danger. She confides in Marian Halcombe, who is determined to protect Laura from harm and expose the conspiracy against her. Together, they uncover evidence that Fosco is not the man he pretends to be and that he is involved in a plot to defraud Laura of her inheritance. As the tension in the house escalates, Fosco and Sir Percival's plans begin to unravel. Marian and Walter work together to gather evidence against them, and Laura becomes increasingly ill from the stress of the situation. But despite their best efforts, it seems that Fosco and Sir Percival may be too cunning to be caught. In a dramatic turn of events, Marian is able to outsmart Fosco and discover evidence that will expose the conspiracy. However, their triumph is short-lived, as Fosco is able to escape and flee the country before he can be brought to justice. The cunning plot of Count Fosco is revealed, and the danger to Laura is averted, but the consequences of the deception and greed continue to haunt the characters. Marian and Walter are left to pick up the pieces and try to rebuild their lives, while Laura must come to terms with the truth about Sir Percival and the men who conspired against. Chapter 17. A Desperate Plan to Save Laura. The discovery of Sir Percival Glyde's true character has left Laura Fairlie in a precarious position. She is engaged to a man who is willing to go to great lengths to secure his own financial gain, including attempting to have her falsely committed to an asylum. With the help of her half-sister, Marian Halcombe, Laura devises a desperate plan to escape Sir Percival's clutches. Marian and Laura meet secretly in the grounds of Blackwater Park to discuss their plan. Laura reveals that she has a hidden fortune of her own, left to her by her late mother. Marian suggests that they use this money to bribe Sir Percival's accomplice, Count Fosco, into helping them. The plan involves Laura faking her own death by taking a sleeping draught that will cause her to appear dead for a short time. Marian will then take her place in the coffin and be taken away for burial. Meanwhile, Laura will escape with the help of Count Fosco and flee to London, where she will seek refuge with a trusted friend. The plan is risky, and both women are aware of the dangers they face. However, they are determined to do whatever it takes to escape Sir Percival's grasp. They set their plan in motion, and Laura takes the sleeping draught. Marian prepares herself to take Laura's place in the coffin, and they wait for the arrival of the hearse. The tension is high as they watch and wait, hoping that their plan will succeed. Finally, the hearse arrives, and Marian is placed in the coffin. As they make their way to the burial ground, Laura makes her escape with Count Fosco. The plan is not without its complications, however. Sir Percival discovers their scheme and orders his men to pursue Laura and Count Fosco. The chase is on, and the two fugitives must use all their wits and resources to evade their pursuers and reach their destination. In the end, Laura's desperate plan succeeds, and she is able to escape Sir Percival's clutches. However, the danger is not yet over, and they must remain vigilant to avoid being captured and return to Blackwater Park. Chapter 18. The Aftermath of Tragedy. The events at Blackwater Park have left a deep impact on all those involved. Laura is still recovering from her ordeal, and her sister Marian is struggling to come to terms with the tragic loss of her beloved Walter. Sir Percival is consumed with guilt over his part in Walter's demise, but he is also determined to protect his reputation at any cost. The house is now filled with a sense of unease, with the servants whispering amongst themselves about the strange occurrences at Blackwater Park. Count Fosco, however, seems unaffected by the events and continues to go about his business with his usual calm demeanor. Marian is determined to uncover the truth about what happened to Walter and to bring those responsible to justice. She turns to Mr. Gilmore, a family friend and lawyer, for help. He promises to do everything in his power to assist her and Laura. Meanwhile, Sir Percival is keen to leave the country with Laura and start afresh in Italy. He pressures Laura to comply with his wishes, but she is hesitant and fearful of what may happen if they leave England. As the days pass, tensions continue to rise. Marian becomes increasingly convinced that Sir Percival and Count Fosco are hiding something, and she is determined to find out what it is. She enlists the help of a local doctor to investigate the mysterious circumstances surrounding Walter's death. Sir Percival, however, is not content to let Marian's investigations go unchecked. He hires a private detective to keep a close eye on her and prevent her from uncovering the truth. The detective's presence only serves to increase Marian's suspicions, and she becomes more determined than ever to solve the mystery. As the household teeters on the brink of chaos, the arrival of a mysterious stranger sets events in motion that will have far-reaching consequences. Marian, Laura, and Mr. Gilmore must work together to unravel the web of deceit and uncover the truth before it's too late. The aftermath of tragedy has left a lasting impact on all those involved, and as the plot thickens, it becomes clear that the secrets buried at Blackwater Park are more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The search for truth will lead the characters down a treacherous path, with dangers lurking at every turn. Will they be able to uncover the truth before it's too late? Only time will tell. Chapter 19. A Fatal Encounter. The events at Blackwater Park have taken a toll on Laura, who has fallen into a deep depression. She is consumed with guilt over her involvement in the tragedy that has befallen her family. Sir Percival, on the other hand, appears unaffected by the recent events and is preoccupied with his own affairs. Meanwhile, Walter Hartright has returned to England and is determined to uncover the truth behind Catherick's disappearance. He meets with Marian Halcombe, and together they devise a plan to confront Sir Percival and force him to reveal the whereabouts of Anne. Their plan leads them to an abandoned house where they believe Sir Percival is hiding. As they approach the house, they are suddenly confronted by a figure in the shadows. It is Sir Percival, armed with a pistol. He accuses Walter and Marian of being in league with Catherick and threatens to shoot them. A struggle ensues, and in the chaos, the pistol goes off, fatally injuring Sir Percival. As he lies dying, he reveals the truth about his past and his involvement in Catherick's disappearance. He also confesses to his mistreatment of Laura and Marian, expressing regret for his actions. Walter and Marian are left to deal with the aftermath of the fatal encounter. They are relieved that the truth has finally been revealed, but they are also left with a sense of sadness and loss. They reflect on the events that have led them to this moment and the impact it has had on their lives. As they leave the abandoned house, they are confronted once again by the figure in the shadows. It is Count Fosco, who has been watching their every move. He warns them of the dangers they face and threatens to expose their involvement in Sir Percival's death if they do not leave immediately. Walter and Marian leave the scene, but they are left with a sense of unease. They know that their involvement in Sir Percival's death will have consequences, but they also know that they did what they had to do to uncover the truth and protect Laura. The future remains uncertain, but for now, they can only hope that justice will be served. Chapter 20. Count Fosco's Deception and Unmasked. It was a dark and stormy night, and Walter Hartright's heart was pounding with excitement as he and his companions made their way to Count Fosco's house. They were on a mission to unmask the Count's deception, and Walter was determined to get to the bottom of things. As they approached the house, they could see that it was shrouded in darkness. But Walter was not deterred. He led the way, his heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the house, they found themselves in a labyrinth of rooms and corridors. But they pressed on, driven by their determination to expose the Count's lies. Finally, they came upon a room that was filled with documents and letters. Walter began to pore over them, searching for evidence of the Count's wrongdoing. And then he found it. In a letter from the Count to Sir Percival, Walter discovered that Laura had been drugged and forced to sign a marriage contract. It was the proof they had been searching for. But their triumph was short-lived. The Count and Sir Percival soon appeared, and a fierce battle ensued. But in the end, justice prevailed. Sir Percival was arrested, and the Count fled, never to be seen again. As Walter and his companions emerged from the house, they were greeted by the sound of cheers and applause. They had succeeded in their quest, and justice had been served. But for Walter, there was no time to celebrate. He knew that Laura was still in danger, and he was determined to rescue her. With a heavy heart, he set off on his next mission, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he rode off into the night, Walter knew that he had made a difference. He had exposed the truth and helped to bring an end to the deception that had threatened Laura's life. And for that, he could be proud. Chapter 21. An Emotional Reunion. The emotions run high as Walter Hartright reunites with his beloved Laura at Limmeridge House. Laura is overjoyed to see Walter, and they both share a tender embrace. However, their reunion is short-lived as Sir Percival interrupts their moment and demands an explanation for Walter's unexpected return. Walter is surprised by Sir Percival's hostile reaction and senses that something is amiss. He notices that Laura seems afraid and uneasy in Sir Percival's presence. Sir Percival dismisses Walter and demands that Laura accompany him to London immediately, much to her dismay. As Laura prepares to leave, Walter realizes that this may be his last chance to uncover the truth about Sir Percival and the mysterious Catherick. He asks Laura to meet him secretly in London so that they can speak privately about their suspicions. Laura agrees to meet Walter and gives him a letter containing information about Sir Percival's past that may be useful in their investigation. She begs Walter to be careful and to protect her from Sir Percival's wrath. Walter leaves Limmeridge House with a heavy heart, knowing that the woman he loves is in danger. He travels to London with a renewed sense of purpose and a determination to uncover the truth about Sir Percival and his dark secrets. As he arrives in London, Walter realizes that he is being followed by a mysterious figure. He feels uneasy and suspects that Sir Percival may be tracking his movements. Walter decides to take precautions and begins to conduct his investigation in secret. The investigation leads him to a small cottage on the outskirts of London where he finally meets Catherick, the woman who holds the key to the mystery, and reveals shocking information about Sir Percival's past and his involvement in a cruel and heartless scheme. Walter is horrified by the truth and realizes that he must act quickly to save Laura from Sir Percival's grasp. He hurries back to Limmeridge House with the evidence he has gathered and prepares to confront Sir Percival and expose his treachery. The stage is set for a final showdown between Walter and Sir Percival, as they battle for the heart and soul of the woman they both love. As the truth is revealed, the lives of all involved will never be the same again. Chapter 22. The Search for Laura. The news of Laura's escape had spread like wildfire, and everyone in the vicinity was on the lookout for her. Sir Percival and Count Fosco were infuriated by her escape, and they were determined to find her and bring her back to Blackwater Park. Walter and Marian were equally determined to find her first, and they set out on a search. They visited every nearby town, every train station, and every hotel, but Laura was nowhere to be found. The search seemed hopeless, but they refused to give up. As they traveled farther away from Blackwater Park, Walter began to suspect that Laura might have taken refuge with Catherick's mother. They made their way to the small village of Old Welmingham, where they found Mrs. Catherick. She was reluctant to help at first, but Walter managed to persuade her to reveal Laura's whereabouts. They discovered that Laura had been staying with a group of farm laborers in the nearby village of Todd's Corner. They immediately made their way there and found her living in a small cottage. Laura was overjoyed to see them, and she told them about her harrowing escape from Blackwater Park. She had managed to slip out of the house undetected and had made her way to the nearby town of Windsor. There, she had met a kind woman who had helped her escape by giving her a new identity and a place to stay. But when Sir Percival and Count Fosco had discovered her whereabouts, she had been forced to flee once again. Walter and Marian were determined to protect Laura and keep her safe from Sir Percival and Count Fosco. They arranged for her to stay with Mrs. Catherick, who promised to keep her hidden from the two men. Meanwhile, Walter and Marian set out to gather evidence against Sir Percival and Count Fosco. Their investigations led them to a shocking discovery. Sir Percival had a secret wife living in an insane asylum. With this information, they were able to force Sir Percival to confess to his crimes and give up all claims to Laura's fortune. The final confrontation between Walter, Marian, Sir Percival, and Count Fosco was a dramatic one, and it ended in tragedy. Count Fosco died from a heart attack, and Sir Percival was killed while attempting to flee from the police. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Walter and Laura were finally able to be together. They were married and settled down in the countryside, far away from the memories of their harrowing ordeal. Chapter 23. A Shocking Confession. The events at Blackwater Park had left me reeling with shock and disbelief. The terrible truth about Sir Percival's past had been revealed, and I could not shake off the feeling of horror that engulfed me. Laura was safe, but her happiness had been shattered forever. As we left Blackwater Park, Walter and I were deep in conversation, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. We were determined to bring Sir Percival to justice and put an end to his cruel machinations. It was then that we heard a voice calling out to us from the shadows. It was Catherick. She was in a pitiful state, her clothing in rags and her face gaunt with hunger. She implored us to listen to her, to hear her story. We took her to a nearby inn, where we could talk in private. What she told us was a shocking confession. She had been sent to Blackwater Park to impersonate Laura, by none other than Sir Percival himself. He had promised to take care of her and protect her from harm. But Anne had grown increasingly disturbed and fearful, and had eventually tried to escape from Blackwater Park. Sir Percival had pursued her relentlessly, determined to silence her forever. He had arranged for her to be locked up in an asylum, where she had suffered terrible abuse and torment. She had managed to escape, but had been on the run ever since, and begged us to help her find a safe haven, where she could hide from Sir Percival's reach. We knew that we could not turn our backs on her plight, and resolved to do all we could to protect her. But we also knew that we had to act fast. Sir Percival would stop at nothing to silence Anne, and we had to find a way to expose his crimes before it was too late. As we made our plans, I felt a sense of renewed determination. I had seen the worst of human nature, but I had also witnessed the power of love and loyalty. And I knew that with Walter and Marian by my side, we could face any challenge and overcome any obstacle. The confession had been shocking, but it had also strengthened our resolve to seek justice and put an end to the darkness that had plagued our lives. Chapter 24. A Desperate Flight. The events that followed Laura's discovery were overwhelming. With Sir Percival and Count Fosco closing in on her, Laura was forced to flee once again. But where could she go? With no one to turn to, she had to rely on her own strength and courage to escape the clutches of her oppressors. She fled to London with Marian, disguised as a boy to avoid being recognized. Their journey was long and perilous, but they finally reached their destination, exhausted and desperate. They sought refuge in a small lodging house, hoping to hide from their pursuers. But Sir Percival and Count Fosco were not ones to give up easily. They had discovered Laura's whereabouts and were hot on her trail. In a desperate attempt to escape, Laura and Marian fled again, this time to a remote location in the countryside. Their new hideout was a small cottage in the woods, isolated and far from any town or village. Here, they hoped to remain hidden and safe until they could come up with a plan. But the fear of being discovered never left them, and they lived in constant dread of being found by their enemies. As the days passed, they received a message from Walter Hartright, who had returned to England and was desperately searching for them. With his help, they hatched a plan to escape the country and start a new life far away from their tormentors. Their only hope was to take a ship to South America, where they could live in anonymity and safety. But the journey was long and dangerous, and they had to be careful not to attract any attention. They traveled under false names and disguised their appearance, hoping to avoid detection. Finally, after weeks of travel, they arrived in South America and started a new life under new identities. They were safe at last, but the memory of their harrowing ordeal never left them. The events that had transpired had left them scarred and traumatized, but they were grateful to be alive and free from the clutches of their oppressors. They had survived against all odds and had proven that courage and determination could conquer even the most formidable foes. As they settled into their new life, they knew that they could never forget the lessons they had learned. The dangers they had faced had taught them the value of love, friendship, and the unbreakable human spirit. And they knew that no matter what the future held, they would always be ready to face it with strength and courage. Chapter 25. The Discovery of Laura. It was a desperate situation for Walter Hartright as he searched the streets of London for any sign of Laura. He had followed the false trail laid out by Count Fosco and now found himself lost and alone in the city. However, a chance encounter with a stranger would lead him to the one person who could help him in his quest. The stranger turned out to be none other than Sir Percival Glyde's former valet, who had been dismissed from service by his master. He knew of Laura's whereabouts and agreed to take Walter to her. It was a risky move, but Walter had no other choice. The valet led him to an obscure part of the city, where they arrived at a secluded house. As they entered, they were greeted by a frail-looking Laura, who had clearly suffered during her time in hiding. She was surprised to see Walter, but overjoyed nonetheless. Walter and Laura sat down to talk, and she revealed the terrible truth about her marriage to Sir Percival Glyde. She spoke of his cruelty and abuse, and how she had been forced to flee from Blackwater Park in fear of her life. Walter was filled with rage and vowed to bring Sir Percival to justice. Laura, however, was more concerned with her own safety and begged Walter to take her away from London. She knew that Sir Percival would not rest until he had found her and would stop at nothing to get her back. Walter agreed to take Laura away, but they both knew that it was not going to be an easy task. Sir Percival and Count Fosco were still out there, and they would not give up their pursuit easily. As they prepared to leave, the valet came to Walter with a warning. He had overheard Sir Percival and Count Fosco discussing their plans, and they were closing in on them. Walter knew that they had to leave immediately, and so they set out on their dangerous journey. It was a perilous journey, filled with danger at every turn. They were pursued by Sir Percival and Count Fosco, who were determined to capture Laura and take her back to Blackwater Park. But Walter was determined to protect her at all costs, and he fought fiercely to keep her safe. Finally, after a long and exhausting journey, they reached their destination, a safe haven where Laura could be hidden from her pursuers. But even as they breathed a sigh of relief, they knew that the threat of Sir Percival and Count Fosco still loomed large, and that their battle was far from over. Chapter 26. The Final Confrontation. In the dim light of the Blackwater Park Library, Count Fosco reveals his true nature as he taunts Walter and Laura. His diabolical plans to keep Laura under his control have been thwarted, but he still has one last trick up his sleeve. Fosco's demeanor is confident and smug as he lays out his final plan. He has arranged for Laura to be falsely committed to an insane asylum and for her to receive cruel and inhumane treatment there, effectively removing her from society and ensuring that she will never escape his grasp. Walter and Laura are helpless as Fosco reveals his plan, but they are not defeated. With Miss Halcombe's help, they have a plan of their own. They have evidence that will expose Fosco's crimes, and they are prepared to use it. The tension in the room is palpable as the two sides prepare for a final confrontation. Fosco, with his cunning and intelligence, is a formidable opponent, but Walter and Laura are determined to see justice done. As the confrontation begins, Fosco uses all of his wiles to try to outmaneuver his opponents, but they are ready for him. The evidence they present is damning, and Fosco is forced to admit to his crimes. He is arrested and led away, defeated and humiliated. The aftermath of the confrontation is chaotic, with emotions running high. Walter and Laura are overjoyed to be reunited and finally free from Fosco's grasp. Miss Halcombe, who played a crucial role in their victory, is celebrated for her bravery and quick thinking. The story ends on a bittersweet note as the characters reflect on the events that have transpired. They have all been irreversibly changed by the experience, but they have also emerged stronger and more resilient. The lessons they have learned will stay with them for the rest of their lives. As the final pages of the book are turned, the reader is left with a sense of closure and resolution. The evil that threatened to destroy the lives of the characters has been defeated, and they are now free to live their lives as they choose. It is a satisfying end to a thrilling and suspenseful story that has captivated readers for generations. Chapter 27. Laura's Escape. The events of the past few days had taken a toll on Laura. She was exhausted and fearful, but determined to escape from the clutches of Sir Percival and Count Fosco. With the help of Marian, she had devised a plan to flee from Blackwater Park. Under the cover of darkness, Laura and Marian made their way to the boathouse. As they rowed the boat across the lake, Laura could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that if they were caught, the consequences would be dire. They reached the other side of the lake and hurried towards the waiting carriage. But their luck was not on their side. As they were about to get in, they were ambushed by Sir Percival and Count Fosco. The men had been lying in wait for them, and they were not going to let Laura escape so easily. Laura was terrified, but Marian was quick to act. She threw herself at Sir Percival, giving Laura the opportunity to get into the carriage. As Marian fought bravely, Laura urged the driver to hurry away from Blackwater Park. The carriage rattled along the road, and Laura felt a sense of relief wash over her. But their troubles were not yet over. As they approached the outskirts of London, they were stopped by a police checkpoint. The officers demanded to see their papers and asked why they were traveling at such a late hour. Laura and Marian were at a loss for words. They knew that if they were caught, they would be returned to Blackwater Park. But then, to their surprise, one of the officers recognized Laura. He had seen her portrait in the newspapers and knew that she was in danger. The officer allowed them to continue on their journey, and soon they arrived at a safe house in London. Laura was exhausted but relieved. She knew that she had narrowly escaped a terrible fate, thanks to the bravery of Marian and the kindness of the police officer. But their troubles were not yet over. They still had to uncover the truth about Sir Percival and Count Fosco and bring them to justice. Laura was determined to do whatever it took to ensure that they were held accountable for their crimes. As she lay in her bed, Listening to the sounds of the city outside, Laura knew that she had a difficult journey ahead of her. But she also knew that she had the strength and determination to see it through. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities for justice and freedom. Chapter 28. An Ominous Warning. The night was dark and quiet, the only sound coming from the gentle rustle of leaves as a cool breeze swept through the trees. It was at this time that Count Fosco paid a visit to Sir Percival Glyde's home, Blackwater Park, to deliver an ominous warning. The Count had become increasingly agitated since his plot to deceive Laura had been uncovered, and his warning was filled with a sense of impending danger. He warned Sir Percival that he should be cautious, as he was being watched by someone who knew of his past. The warning left Sir Percival uneasy, and he immediately began to take precautions to protect himself. He hired additional guards and increased security at the park, determined to find out who was watching him and put an end to their meddling. Despite his efforts, Sir Percival could not shake the feeling of dread that the Count's warning had instilled in him. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that his past misdeeds were about to catch up with him. Meanwhile, Walter Hartright and Marian Halcombe had arrived in the nearby town of Knowlesbury, determined to find evidence that would exonerate Laura and bring Sir Percival to justice. They were aided in their quest by Mr. Gilmore, a lawyer who had been investigating Sir Percival's past. Their search led them to a churchyard, where they made a shocking discovery. They found the grave of Sir Percival's first wife, which bore a striking resemblance to Laura. This discovery only added to the mounting evidence that Sir Percival was involved in a sinister plot to deceive Laura and rob her of her inheritance. As the investigation continued, the danger surrounding the protagonists only grew. Count Fosco's warning had not been idle, and the forces that were working against Walter, Marian, and Laura were becoming increasingly bold and violent. The ominous warning delivered by Count Fosco had set off a chain of events that would lead to a dramatic and dangerous confrontation. The search for the truth would continue, but the protagonists would have to be careful, for they were playing a deadly game with powerful and ruthless opponents. As the night wore on, the wind picked up and the branches of the trees creaked and groaned under its force. The warning given by the Count hung heavy in the air, and the tension and unease it had brought with it seemed to permeate the very atmosphere around them. Chapter 29. A Grave Discovery. As the events unfolded, and the truth behind Laura's marriage to Sir Percival Glyde was revealed, the tension in the household at Blackwater Park reached new heights. Walter Hartright, Marian Halcombe, and Count Fosco were all aware that time was running out and they needed to act quickly if they were to save Laura from her cruel husband's clutches. During this critical time, Walter received a letter from Catherick, the mysterious woman who had been haunting their lives for months. The letter contained crucial information that could prove to be the key to unlocking the secrets of Sir Percival's past and revealing the truth about his connection to Anne. Walter immediately shared the contents of the letter with Marian and Count Fosco, and they began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. They discovered that Sir Percival had played a significant role in Anne's confinement at the asylum, and that her confinement was related to a dark secret that Sir Percival was desperate to keep hidden. With this knowledge, the group decided to search for Anne's grave in the hopes of finding evidence that could incriminate Sir Percival. Their search led them to a desolate and overgrown cemetery, where they finally stumbled upon Anne's grave. As they dug deeper, they found a wooden box containing a letter that confirmed their worst fears. The letter revealed that Sir Percival had forced Anne to sign a false marriage certificate that would have made him the legal heir to a significant fortune. However, Anne had refused to go through with the plan, leading to her eventual confinement at the asylum. The discovery of Anne's grave and the letter proved to be a turning point in the case against Sir Percival Glyde. With this damning evidence in their possession, Walter, Marian, and Count Fosco felt confident that they could finally bring Sir Percival to justice and free Laura from his grasp. But as they prepared to leave the cemetery, they were confronted by Sir Percival and his henchmen. In the ensuing chaos, Walter was badly injured, and Sir Percival managed to escape with the letter in his possession. The group was devastated by this setback, but they refused to give up. They knew that they had come too far to let Sir Percival escape justice, and they were determined to see their plan through to the end. With renewed vigor, they vowed to continue their pursuit of Sir Percival and bring him to justice, no matter the cost. Chapter 30. The Return of Catherick. As the night deepened, Sir Percival and Count Fosco's plot to trap Catherick became more urgent. The two men, accompanied by two of their loyal servants, stationed themselves outside the churchyard where Anne was known to frequent, waiting patiently for her arrival. Finally, the sound of approaching footsteps caused them to draw back into the shadows. As Anne drew near, the servants sprang forward, seizing her and muffling her cries for help. Sir Percival and Count Fosco emerged from the darkness, their faces twisted with malicious glee at the success of their plan. Despite her struggles, Anne was forcibly dragged to a waiting carriage and whisked away to an isolated house on the outskirts of London. There, she was imprisoned in a room with boarded-up windows and a locked door, cut off from the outside world. For days, Anne languished in her cell, her spirit broken by her captor's cruelty. She longed for her freedom and for the companionship of her beloved Laura, but both seemed hopelessly out of reach. Meanwhile, Walter Hartright was hot on Sir Percival and Count Fosco's trail. With the help of a dedicated police officer, he traced the villain's movements to the outskirts of London, where he discovered the house where Anne was being held captive. With steely determination, Walter gathered a group of trustworthy men and stormed the house, breaking down the door to Anne's room and freeing her from her prison. Despite her weakened state, Anne was overjoyed to be reunited with Walter and to learn that her dear friend Laura was safe and well. Her relief was palpable, and she clung to Walter's arm as they made their way out of the sinister house. But their journey was not yet over. Sir Percival and Count Fosco were still at large, and danger lurked around every corner. With Anne in their care, Walter and his companions set off on a treacherous journey back to Limmeridge House, where they hoped to finally put an end to the villain's wicked schemes. As they traveled through the dark and eerie countryside, Walter and Anne clung to each other, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and hope. But they knew that they were not alone. With the help of their friends and allies, they would prevail over evil and emerge victorious. They loved. Chapter 31. The Truth Revealed. As Catherick rested in a state of exhaustion after her ordeal, Walter Hartright and Laura Fairlie were hot on the trail of the villains who had caused them so much pain and suffering. They had reason to believe that Sir Percival, Glyde, and Count Fosco were hiding in the nearby town of Knowlesbury, and they were determined to bring them to justice. With the help of their loyal friend and ally, Mr. Gilmore, they devised a plan to capture the villains and force them to confess their crimes. It was a risky strategy, but one they were willing to undertake in order to bring closure to their traumatic experiences. Disguised in hats and overcoats, Walter and Mr. Gilmore made their way to the local inn where Sir Percival and Count Fosco were rumored to be hiding. There, they found the two men sitting in front of a roaring fire, enjoying a meal and a bottle of wine. Without hesitation, Walter and Mr. Gilmore revealed their true identities and accused the villains of their crimes. At first, Sir Percival and Count Fosco tried to deny any wrongdoing, but their lies were quickly exposed by the overwhelming evidence against them. As the tension in the room mounted, Sir Percival grew increasingly agitated and began to rant and rave like a madman. Count Fosco, on the other hand, remained calm and collected, biding his time for a chance to escape. But he was not quick enough. Walter and Mr. Gilmore had already alerted the police, who burst into the room just as Count Fosco attempted to flee. He was apprehended and taken into custody, along with Sir Percival, who had collapsed into a state of hysteria. With the villains finally captured, the truth behind their nefarious plot was revealed. It was a tale of greed, deception, and heartless cruelty, all perpetrated in the pursuit of wealth and power. But justice had been served, and the victims could finally rest easy knowing that their tormentors had been brought to account for their sins. For Walter and Laura, it was a bittersweet victory, tinged with the sadness of what they had lost along the way. But they could take solace in the fact that they had emerged stronger and wiser from their harrowing experiences, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Chapter 32: A Race Against Time. The urgency of Laura's situation had reached critical levels as she continued to deteriorate under the care of the unscrupulous Count Fosco. Her devoted husband, Sir Percival, had not yet given up on her, but his efforts were in vain as the Count's influence over her continued to grow. Walter Hartright, who had been tirelessly working to uncover the truth behind Sir Percival and Count Fosco's schemes, had finally found a lead on Laura's whereabouts. He raced against time to reach her and free her from the clutches of the Count. As Walter made his way to the isolated asylum where Laura was being held, he could feel his heart pounding with anxiety. The fate of his beloved Laura depended on his success in this mission. He knew that the Count would not hesitate to take extreme measures to prevent Laura's rescue, so he had to be cautious. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Walter arrived at the asylum. With all the courage he could muster, he pushed open the door and rushed to Laura's side. Her condition was worse than he had imagined. She was barely conscious and weak from malnourishment. Walter knew that they had to leave immediately, but it wouldn't be easy. The Count had left strict orders to the guards to prevent any escape attempts. But Walter was determined to get Laura out of there. He took out his revolver and, with a steady hand, aimed it at the guards. With a menacing glare, he ordered them to stand down and let him pass. The guards, intimidated by his determination and the cold steel of the revolver, acquiesced, and Walter quickly lifted Laura in his arms and fled the asylum. The journey back to London was fraught with danger as the Count's minions pursued them relentlessly. Walter used all his cunning to evade them and keep Laura safe. Finally, they arrived at their destination, exhausted but relieved. Laura's health gradually improved under Walter's care, and the truth behind the schemes of Sir Percival and the Count were exposed. Justice was served, and Laura was finally able to live the life she deserved, free from the threats of those who sought to harm her. As Walter watched Laura recover and thrive, he knew that his love for her had only grown stronger. He had risked everything to save her, and in doing so, had proven that his devotion to her was unbreakable. Chapter 33: The Final Betrayal. My nerves had been strung to their limits, and I could hardly bear the strain any longer. I could see no way out of this terrible situation. I was trapped, and I knew it. But then, like a glimmer of hope, I remembered something that had been said to me earlier. It was an offhand comment made by a man who had no idea of the significance of his words. But to me, those words were everything. With renewed energy, I began to piece together the puzzle of Sir Percival, Glyde, and Count Fosco's scheme. I started to see through their lies and deceit, and I realized that I had one chance to escape their clutches. I made a plan, and it was a dangerous one. But I was desperate, and I had no other choice. I knew that I had to trust in my own instincts, even though everything around me seemed to be falling apart. When the moment came, I took my chance. I ran, fast and hard, into the night. I knew that I was risking everything, but I had to try. I could not stay trapped in that terrible place any longer. I will never forget the sound of my own heartbeat as I ran through the darkness. It was the sound of hope, of freedom, of a life that I thought I had lost forever. And then, as I turned a corner, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. It was a figure looming out of the darkness. It was Sir Percival Glyde himself. I froze. I was sure that he would catch me and that everything would be over. But then, to my surprise, he simply walked past me as though I was not even there. It was then that I realized the full extent of their deception. Sir Percival Glyde and Count Fosco had been playing me for a fool all along. They had no real power over me, and they knew it. They were simply using me to further their own twisted goals. As I stood there in the darkness, I knew that I had won. I had escaped from their grasp, and I had found a way to freedom. It was not an easy road, but it was one that I had to take, and I was glad to have taken it. Chapter 34. The Truth Will Out. The day of Laura's wedding arrives, and tensions are high at the church. Sir Percival is nervous and fidgety, while Laura appears pale and wan. As they stand at the altar, Laura's hand suddenly trembles, and she drops her wedding ring. This small incident causes Sir Percival to become visibly agitated, and he demands that the ceremony continue without the ring. After the ceremony, Walter and Marian visit Laura at Blackwater Park to congratulate her. They find her in a state of shock and despair, and she confides in them that Sir Percival has threatened her with violence if she does not go through with the marriage. Laura also reveals that she knows the true identity of Catherick, and that she and Sir Percival have been keeping her captive at the park. Walter and Marian are horrified by this revelation and immediately begin to hatch a plan to rescue Anne. They enlist the help of a local doctor, Dr. Dawson, and together they sneak into the park at night. They find Anne in a hidden room, and Walter and Marian are finally able to hear her full story. It turns out that Anne was not the daughter of Laura's father, as Sir Percival had claimed. Instead, she was the illegitimate child of Laura's mother, and her father was the late Sir Felix Glyde, Sir Percival's older brother. Sir Percival had married Laura in order to gain control of her inheritance, which rightfully belonged to Anne. He had then hidden Anne away, fearing that she would reveal the truth and ruin his plans. With this knowledge, Walter and Marian are able to confront Sir Percival and force him to sign a confession of his crimes. Sir Percival is arrested, and Anne is finally able to be released from her captivity. The truth is revealed to all, and Laura is able to escape from the clutches of her cruel husband. In the aftermath of these events, Walter and Laura are finally able to be together, and they make plans to start a new life in Australia. Marian remains at Limmeridge House, where she continues to care for her invalid mother. Despite the hardships and dangers they have faced, the three friends are able to find happiness and hope for the future. Chapter 35. A Dangerous Pursuit. After the shocking revelation of Count Fosco's involvement in Laura's abduction, Walter Hartright is consumed with a burning desire to bring the villain to justice. With the help of the determined Marian Halcombe, he embarks on a dangerous pursuit of the Count and his accomplice, Sir Percival Glyde. Their pursuit takes them to the Italian quarter of London, where they discover that Fosco and Glyde have already fled to the continent. Determined not to be deterred, Walter and Marian continue their pursuit, following the trail of the villains across Europe. Their journey takes them through France and into Italy, where they finally catch up with their prey in the town of Bologna. Here, they are met with unexpected resistance from Fosco, who has enlisted the help of a group of bandits to protect him from capture. Undeterred, Walter and Marian engage in a desperate battle with the bandits, risking their lives to apprehend Fosco and bring him to justice. In the chaos of the fight, Fosco manages to slip away, leaving behind only his accomplice, Sir Percival Glyde, who is finally brought to justice for his crimes. As they leave Bologna and make their way back to England, Walter and Marian reflect on the events that have led them to this moment. They are filled with a sense of satisfaction and relief that justice has been served, but they cannot forget the toll that the pursuit has taken on them. For Walter, the pursuit has been a test of his courage and determination, as he has faced danger and adversity at every turn. For Marian, it has been a test of her strength and resilience, as she has stood by Walter's side and supported him through every challenge. Together, they have proven themselves to be a formidable force, capable of overcoming any obstacle in their pursuit of justice. As they return to England and begin to rebuild their lives, they do so with the knowledge that they have played a vital role in bringing an end to the tyranny of Count Fosco and Sir Percival Glyde. Chapter 36. The Great Conspiracy Unravels. The night had fallen, and the dim light of the moon was the only source of illumination in the deserted streets. Walter Hartright had been determined to bring the conspiracy to light and expose the villainous actions of Sir Percival and Count Fosco, no matter the cost. He met Marian and explained the plan. They agreed to go to Blackwater Park and confront Sir Percival and Count Fosco. The duo arrived at the park and overheard the conversation between Sir Percival and Count Fosco. They revealed their plan to leave the country forever, with Laura, and disappear from the face of the earth. Walter and Marian realized the gravity of the situation and the urgency to act quickly. They hatched a plan to save Laura and bring the conspirators to justice. Walter was to rescue Laura, while Marian would confront Sir Percival and Count Fosco. Walter went inside the park and found Laura, who was being held captive. They escaped, and Walter assured her that they were safe now. Meanwhile, Marian confronted Sir Percival and Count Fosco, and to their shock, revealed that she had been recording their conversation the entire time. The villains were furious and attacked Marian, but she fought back fiercely, using all her strength and determination to hold them off. In the meantime, Walter and Laura had reached the asylum where Catherick was being kept. There, Anne revealed the truth about her past and the identity of her mother. Marian managed to escape and ran towards Walter and Laura, pursued by Sir Percival and Count Fosco. A thrilling chase ensued, and just when it seemed that the villains would succeed, a group of men arrived, led by Mr. Dawson, Laura's trusted doctor. They apprehended Sir Percival and Count Fosco, and the conspiracy was finally exposed. In the aftermath, the truth was revealed, and justice was served. Laura was reunited with her family, and Sir Percival and Count Fosco were held accountable for their actions. Walter and Marian's bravery was celebrated, and they were hailed as heroes. The great conspiracy had unraveled, and the darkness that had engulfed their lives had been dispelled. The road ahead was uncertain, but with the truth out in the open, they could face whatever lay ahead with courage and hope. Chapter 37. The Final Showdown. The climactic moment had arrived, and all the pieces were in place for the final showdown. Walter Hartright and Marian Halcombe had made their way to Count Fosco's hiding place, armed with evidence that would put an end to his scheming once and for all. As they entered the room, the Count rose to greet them, but his confident demeanor faltered when he saw the look in their eyes. He knew that his game was up. "You have no proof," he sneered, trying to maintain his composure. "You have nothing that can stand up in court." But Walter was undeterred. "We have the testimony of Laura herself," he replied, "and we have your confession, written in your own hand." At that, Marian produced the incriminating document, and the Count's face went pale. He knew that he had been caught, and that there was no escape. But even in defeat, he refused to go quietly. "You may have won this battle," he hissed, "but the war is far from over. You will never be able to escape my reach." With that, he made a sudden move to attack them, but Marian was quicker, and she brandished a weapon she had brought with her, holding the Count at bay. "You're not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Your reign of terror is over." And with that, the authorities arrived, taking the Count into custody and ensuring that he would face justice for his crimes. As the sun began to rise on a new day, Walter and Marian emerged from the hideout, exhausted but victorious. They had risked everything to bring the truth to light, and they had succeeded. But even as they celebrated their triumph, they knew that the scars left by the Count's actions would take a long time to heal. Laura, especially, would need time and care to recover from the trauma she had endured. Still, they were confident that with each passing day, the darkness would give way to light, and that the memory of the horrors they had faced would slowly fade away. For now, they would rest and begin the process of rebuilding their lives. They had come through the fire and emerged stronger on the other side. The final chapter of The Woman in White had been written, and the story had come to a close. But the legacy of their struggle would live on, a testament to the power of courage, truth, and perseverance. Chapter 38: A Heartbreaking Farewell. The morning after the tragic events of the previous night, a somber mood hung over the house at Blackwater Park. Laura, Sir Percival, and Count Fosco were all gone, leaving behind only the memory of their cruel and devious schemes. Walter Hartright, Miss Halcombe, and Marian were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Miss Halcombe was in a state of shock, having just learned the truth about her identity and the tragic fate of her beloved sister Laura. Marian, too, was struggling to come to terms with everything that had happened, having lost her sister and the man she loved in such a short span of time. Despite their grief, the trio knew that they had to press on and face the consequences of the events that had transpired. They quickly set to work, informing the authorities of what had happened and preparing for the legal proceedings that were sure to follow. As they went about their duties, Walter couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt and regret. He had been unable to protect Laura from the machinations of Sir Percival and Count Fosco, and had even unwittingly played a part in their schemes. He knew that he would carry the weight of his mistakes with him for the rest of his life. As the days passed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Miss Halcombe struggled to come to terms with her new identity and the loss of her sister, while Marian tried to come to grips with the fact that she would never see Walter again. In the end, it was Marian who provided the strength and courage needed to move forward. She had always been the stalwart one, the rock upon which the others could lean. And now, in the face of such tragedy, she proved her mettle once again. As the trio prepared to leave Blackwater Park for good, they paused to say a final goodbye to the place that had been the site of so much pain and suffering. They knew that they would never forget what had happened there, but they also knew that it was time to move on and start anew. As they left the cursed place behind, they walked towards a new dawn, a new beginning. Despite the heartache and loss they had suffered, they knew that they would carry the memories of their loved ones with them always, and that they would never forget the lessons they had learned in their journey through the tangled web of deceit and betrayal that had been their fate. Chapter 39: A New Beginning. The final chapter of The Woman in White begins with a sense of closure, as the characters who have survived the tumultuous events of the story come together for a joyous reunion. Walter Hartright, who has returned to England after a long absence, is greeted warmly by Marian Halcombe and Laura Fairlie, who have both undergone significant personal growth since they were last together. Marian, who has been a pillar of strength throughout the book, is now a more self-assured and confident person, having overcome her physical and emotional struggles. Laura, too, has grown in resilience and fortitude, having survived the horrors of Blackwater Park and the machinations of Sir Percival, Glyde, and Count Fosco. The reunion takes place in the same spot where Walter first saw Laura, on the terrace at Limmeridge House, and it is clear that the three share a deep and enduring bond. As they reminisce about the past, Walter reflects on the many twists and turns that have led them to this moment, and on the profound impact that Laura has had on his life. Despite the hardships they have endured, the characters are hopeful for the future, and the chapter ends with a sense of optimism and possibility. Walter, who has been working on a book about his experiences, expresses his desire to dedicate it to the memory of Laura's father, a kind and generous man who played a significant role in the lives of all three. In this final chapter, Wilkie Collins brings together the many strands of the story, weaving them into a satisfying and emotionally resonant conclusion. The characters, who have faced countless challenges and overcome great adversity, are finally able to move forward into a new chapter of their lives. The novel as a whole is a testament to the power of friendship, courage, and perseverance in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The Woman in White is a timeless masterpiece that continues to captivate readers with its intricate plot, vivid characters, and haunting atmosphere. Chapter 40. The conclusion of The Woman in White. After the events that unfolded at Blackwater Park, Walter Hartright and Marian Halcombe returned to Limmeridge House to find Laura recovering from her ordeal. The trio shared a touching reunion, grateful for their safe return to each other's company. The truth about Sir Percival's schemes had been exposed, and he was no longer a threat to their happiness. However, the aftermath of the events at Blackwater Park left a deep impact on their lives. Laura was deeply traumatized and had lost all trust in men, including Walter, who had once been the love of her life. Marian, too, was deeply affected, both physically and mentally, by the trauma she had endured. Despite their wounds, the group resolved to take action against those who had wronged them. Walter, along with his friend Pesca and the lawyer Mr. Kyrle, worked tirelessly to bring Sir Percival to justice. With the help of Count Fosco's diary, they were able to uncover evidence of his wrongdoing, and he was forced to confess to his crimes. The group was also able to find and rescue Catherick, who had been institutionalized after her traumatic experiences at the hands of Sir Percival. They were able to provide her with the care she needed and restore her to some semblance of a normal life. With justice served, the group was finally able to move on from the events of the past year. Walter, who had once thought he would never find love again, found a new romance with Marian. Laura, too, was able to find some measure of happiness in a life without men. As the years passed, the events at Blackwater Park became a distant memory, but the lessons learned from them stayed with them forever. The importance of truth, loyalty, and the power of love in the face of adversity were lessons that they would carry with them always. In the end, The Woman in White stands as a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most insurmountable obstacles. It is a story of love, loss, and redemption, and one that will be remembered for generations to come.
Thank you for listening to Miniature Masterpiece. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more awesome content.